Morgues in the U.S. have a startling 40,000 unidentified bodies. Many of these remains are kept on hand in case they can be given back to their family members. Unfortunately, not all can be kept due to the constraints of space, thus Potter's Field locations are set up. Whenever a body is unmarked with no name and no identification options, the morgue system will keep DNA and other samples on hand. But even that is a difficult job. Most morgues have the space to keep blood, DNA, and other samples for only a year. With thousands of new cases of unidentified remains occurring each year, it was necessary to start websites like NamUs and Missing Persons of America. It was also imperative to have databases that will keep DNA and other tests on record. In the event the DNA gets added to the system of a known person, it can be matched with the databases. According to the Department of Justice, 86,000 missing people are in the National Crime Information Center database. When family members go missing, one of the first things remaining family will do is submit their DNA to the database. They also make sure to provide a sample of the missing person, such as a hair or other sample from items they left behind. Yet law enforcement still struggles to keep up with the high number of new cases. They still have to rely on luck that remains, witness statements, or other evidence will come in that they can match with an open, cold case. Several families have already gone decades hoping for answers without getting them. What makes multiple disappearances so rare is the method required to make more than one person go missing at the same time. It requires planning, whether the disappearance is willingly or due to foul play. Someone who commits unpremeditated murder usually leaves the bodies behind as evidence because of panic and a lack of planning. Those who intentionally conduct foul play, such as murder, kidnapping, or robbery, also tend to leave the bodies behind. Although rare, there are cases in which multiple people, such as 2 to 4 people from the same family or group of friends, will go missing without any evidence or indication as to what occurred. These startling tales are included within these pages. Be wary and always alert the next time you go out, whether you are alone or with a group of people, because you never know what might happen. Chapter 1. The Indiana Dunes Women. Indian Dunes State Park was filled with nearly 9,000 holiday sunbathers on July 2, 1966. It was a Saturday at noon, when a couple saw 3 women getting into a boat with a man. These 3 women were Ann Miller, Patricia Blau, and Renee Brull. The 3 friends had driven up from Chicago to Indiana Dunes State Park to enjoy the beach in Lake Michigan. The couple who watched the girls felt it was odd that they would leave their purses and beach blankets on the crowded beach. They didn't know the girls, but figured they would watch over their items until they came back. At dusk, the couple told a ranger watching over the park that the blanket and belongings were left behind. They indicated to the ranger that they had watched 3 girls get on a boat that was operated by a man with coal-colored hair and tan skin. The ranger bundled up the items and brought them to the ranger hut to store them in the lost and found. Ann Miller was 21 years old. Both Patricia and Renee were 19 years old. The man, the boat, and the 3 girls have never been seen since July 2, 1966. In July 4, 1966, just 18 hours after the ranger gathered the girls' belongings, Bill Svedek received a phone call. Park Superintendent Svedek received an inquiry from Mr. Blau, Patricia's father. He had not heard from her since she and her two friends left Chicago to go to the park Saturday morning. Svedek instantly went to the blanket to see what he could find. He found Patricia's wallet, keys, clothing, and her companion's clothing and purses. Miller's 1955 Buick was also discovered in the parking lot. It was just one of 2,200 cars which had entered the park on Saturday. Knowing the witnesses had stated the girls went with a guy on his boat, he told Mr. Blau that Patricia would probably turn up after the long weekend. After the weekend and now more than 48 hours missing, Mr. Blau was finally able to get an investigation going into his daughter's disappearance. Scuba teams took to the lake running a search grid, while other foot and horseback patrols went up and down the wooded park area that runs along the 45-mile-long coastline of Indiana. No sign was found, and their case remains open as one of the longest Midwest crime mysteries. A news reporter, Dick Wiley, worked for the Gary Post-Tribune and Chicago Sun-Times during the 50s and 60s. He was the first reporter to come to the park when the three girls went missing. He has a 120,000-word manuscript, as well as countless pages of notes, police files, and interviews he conducted trying to find any evidence as to the three girls' disappearance. Wiley's theory. Blau and Miller were both single. According to Wiley, they were dating married men at the tavern where they worked. There was also evidence to suggest both were pregnant. Bruhl was married, but her married life did not seem to be filled with roses. When investigators found Bruhl's purse, there was a letter addressed to her husband asking for a divorce. She never got around to mailing it. At the time, only one cop in Westchester, Illinois was conducting background checks on the girls because it was their hometown. A state detective was searching the park for clues. This meant that not a lot of manpower was being used to find the three women. According to Wiley, the two cops never even met, even though they were working the same case. For Wiley, he felt the two women's pregnancies were the clues to the entire case. Abortion was illegal in Illinois. Many Chicago women who became pregnant without fathers tended to visit a house in Gary, Indiana. At the house, Helen and Frank Largo would perform backroom abortions. Wiley was also able to link the married couple to a floating abortion mill, which was operated on a houseboat just offshore in Lake Michigan. Wiley believes the three girls went with a young relative of Helen and Frank Largo to go to the houseboat for abortions. Wiley believes that something must have gone wrong with one of the girls during the operation, and rather than leave two witnesses, the other two girls were killed. Wiley said his investigation indicated the girls thought they would be back in 90 minutes, so they left their items on the beach. Did the two women intend on getting abortions? Did the boat with the young man capsize and everyone died trying to get back to shore? With no clues in over 46 years, it is likely that an answer will never be found. If foul play was involved, then three skeletons may still be weighed down with whatever was handy to ensure the crime remains unsolved. Chapter 2. The Fort Worth Three. Mary Rachel Trillica, Lisa Renee Wilson, and Julie Ann Mosley have something in common. They all went missing on December 23, 1974 from Fort Worth, Texas. Mary Rachel was just 17 years old when she went shopping with Lisa Renee, 14 years old, and Julie Ann, 9 years old. The three girls went to the Seminary South Shopping Center to do some last-minute Christmas shopping. The vehicle Mary Rachel was driving was found at 6 p.m. in the mall parking lot. The car was locked and Christmas presents were inside. The presents indicate the girls returned to the car at least once to drop off the items they had purchased, but were they done with their shopping? Did they return to the mall or did something happen when they put the shopping bags in the car? Mary Rachel's family received a letter on December 24. It was supposedly written by Rachel, as she liked to be called. The letter claimed she and the other two girls took off to Houston for a week and that they would be back. Police investigators doubted that Rachel wrote the letter, especially when the girls never returned. Police launched an investigation requesting eyewitnesses to come forward with information. The pictures were published in newspapers, on milk cartons, and on the TV news stations. Some eyewitnesses stated the girls were forced into a vehicle by several unidentifiable males. Another witness statement said the girls were with the mall security guard's truck at 11:30 p.m. that night. Police could not verify either of the stories or any of the others that have been reported since. Details of the case. Police learned Lisa Renee Wilson had been given a promise ring by Julie Ann's older brother Terry. Terry was 15 at the time of the girls' disappearance. The two had plans to attend a party later that day, so Lisa Renee wanted to be back from shopping by 4 p.m. Terry, at 41, recounted the day for MissingTrio.com. He stated the girls asked him to go shopping, but instead he chose to visit a sick friend. The investigators pieced together that the girls stopped at the Army-Navy store to get some layaway items before going to what is now the Fort Worth Town Center. They left the Oldsmobile on an upper level of the garage near Sears. Lisa Renee was wearing an eye-catching shirt that said, "Sweet Honesty." Some witnesses came forward to say they did see the T-shirt, but nothing could be gained from those individuals. The case went cold until 1981. A man stated he had been in the parking lot that day and saw a girl being forced into a van by a man. This witness said he tried to intervene. However, the man backed off when the guy told him it was a family dispute. The witness statement only indicates one girl, and there is no indication that girl matched any of the Fort Worth Three. On December 23, the police did little to investigate, assuming the girls had run away. Family disagreed and tried to search for the girls and convince police to help. When the letter arrived the next morning addressed to Thomas A. Trillica, and not Tommy, as Rachel called her husband, it seemed suspicious. Rachel was also scrawled on the envelope in the upper left-hand corner of the envelope. The envelope did not have a city name, but there was a postal service number. The note read, "I know I'm going to catch it, but we just had to get away. We're going to Houston. See you in about a week. The car is in Sears upper lot. Love, Rachel." The handwriting was more of a childish scrawl than Rachel's. Both Rachel's husband and her mother do not believe the letter was sent by her. The handwriting analysis has been inconclusive. The only other suspicious part of the case is Deborah, Rachel's sister. She was engaged to Tommy. Deborah introduced Rachel to Tommy, which seemed to end their engagement, which Deborah stated was not entirely official. Deborah was also living with the married couple at the time Rachel left home. Deborah did admit she feels Tommy thinks she wrote the letter and may have something to do with the disappearance, but continues to claim she is just as concerned about her sister as all the family. False hope. Everyone tried to weigh in on the case, including psychics with leads that never panned out. There was even a private investigator that did more to keep him in the media spotlight than work the case. At one point, in 1981, an oil company executive found human remains in a bog near Houston. Given the letter, police investigated with the thought that perhaps it would be the Fort Worth Three. After all, during the dig for more bones they did uncover 3 remains belonging to 3 girls, just not the Fort Worth Three it turns out. Another investigator also took interest in the case. His theory is that something happened to Julianne that day. He believes whatever happened sparked the other 2 girls to disappear and that Renee Wilson is dead. For years the investigator believed that something or someone is keeping Rachel from returning home. Occasionally at Christmas time people say they have seen Rachel, or at least a woman that looks like she would several years later, but nothing has ever been confirmed. The families still wait for the one person that knows something to tell them where their loved ones are. The families may never know what occurred, particularly if the disappearances were related to murder or manslaughter. Texas is not a forgiving state. Their statute of limitations for murder, capital murder and manslaughter are all no limit. Kidnapping is 5 years, so if someone did kidnap the girls and let them go, they could reveal what happened without any legal action. In assessing this legal data, the only thing that makes sense is for something to have tragically happened to the girls that would land someone in prison for murder, otherwise why continue to hide what happened? An accident that took all 3 girls' lives is unlikely, given no evidence was found and no bodies have surfaced. Perhaps the perpetrator will leave behind a journal or diary that will someday reveal what happened. If only a trace of bodies could be found, or if only the girls could return home after all these years, the families might gain closure. Chapter 3. The Leone Sisters. A 2002 report from the Department of Justice indicates each year approximately 797,500 children are reported missing. Of this number, about 357,600 children are considered runaways or thrown away. Approximately 340,500 are missing with a benign explanation and have returned to their homes. A startling 56,500 children are abducted by family, while 61,900 are missing involuntarily, lost, or injured. Another 12,100 are missing in non-family abductions. The Department of Justice report was an estimation based on 1,999 data with a 95% confidence interval, which means if the study were repeated 100 times, the same numbers would result. These are just USA numbers. Imagine if a global study was conducted. The good news for most families is a high recovery rate. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children has helped recover missing children since 1994. As of 2014, they helped with 187,800 missing child cases, with a recovery amount of 175,200 children. The higher numbers of missing children, such as benign reasons or runaways, usually result in the children coming back within a few days, if not a few hours. Of the missing involuntarily, only 115 children were classified as kidnapped, in which the child is usually held overnight, transported several miles, usually killed, and the kidnapper demands a ransom. In some cases, these kidnappers keep the child permanently. The Leone sisters fall into the category of missing, never found with suspicion of kidnapping by a stranger. On March 25, 1975, Sheila, 12, and Catherine, 10, went missing from the Wheaton Plaza shopping center in Maryland. The girls went to the mall without parental supervision. When the girls did not return home, their parents contacted authorities. At the time, the investigation became one of the largest in Wheaton. For 1.5 weeks, the family received a phone call requesting $10,000 for the return of the Leone sisters. The family did leave the ransom in a courthouse restroom, but the caller never turned up to retrieve the cash. Police were not without suspects at the time. They were concentrating on one man in particular because a witness stated the two girls had been talking with a man who carried a microphone and tape recorder at the mall. The witness did not come forward for 2 weeks. The witness said the two girls were being loaded into a station wagon, bound and gagged, and the individual looked like the man with the tape recorder and microphone. The leads police received in the case never turned up the identity of the man or the fate of the two sisters. The suspect. During 1975, investigators did interview Lloyd Welch. However, they did not consider him a suspect then. It is only the new detectives looking at the case who see there may be more to Welch than was known at the time. It is known in 1992 a 10-year-old girl was staying with Welch. At the time, he was in South Carolina. The girl was watching a horror movie with him and became scared, so she crawled into bed. She awoke to find that he was molesting her. In 1994, Welch pled guilty. He spent 18 months in jail. Just 3 years later, Welch was in Delaware, where he played pornographic movies in front of a different 10-year-old. According to crime reports, he abused the girl for more than a week. Again he pled guilty and was sentenced to a longer time in jail. New leads. The Washington Post announced new leads on March 14, 2015 regarding the Leone sisters. Detectives were given information 6 months prior to their trip to Taylor's Mountain, Bedford, Virginia. 3 detectives drove 220 miles to request a renter to allow them to explore her property. The renter had been in the home for only a short time, but knew of a graveyard up the hill from the house. The reason for being there was a convicted sex offender who had connections to the land. The individual told detectives he had taken the girls from the mall, according to public court documents. Randy Krantz is a prosecutor involved with the latest search to solve the 40-year-old disappearance of the Leone sisters. He told the media it is a difficult case since so much time has passed. FBI specialists, who are involved since the remains may be in Virginia, meaning they crossed stateliness, are using sifters to sort through the dirt the suspect has indicated may contain clues. Piecing together a timeline is what led police to Taylor's Mountain. It was discovered that his family had property owned by Richard Welch's sister, Lloyd's uncle, which was located in Bedford. It was also known that Patricia admitted Lloyd made a trip to the family property in the spring of 1975. The Welch family has not been very cooperative, and there are several stories from various parties. Lloyd claims he does not know anything about the girls. Yet Patricia says Lloyd has tried to implicate Richard, her father. According to Patricia Ann Welch, Lloyd stated he last saw the girls with Richard and that his uncle was assaulting one of the girls. It is also stated in media reports that Lloyd Welch admitted to leaving the mall with the girls and that Richard and one other relative was with him at the time. Yet Lloyd sent a letter to the same media outlet claiming he said no such things to the police and it is just investigators making up words. It is possible that the Welch family was involved and they simply do not want to admit it. Evidence has yet to prove they had anything to do with the Leone sisters going missing. The hope of the Leone family is that something will prove helpful in the ground search conducted on the old Welch land. If nothing is found, then it is likely neither Lloyd nor Richard will be indicted. The case is weak without proof for the bodies. The last thing to happen in the case, published May 14, 2015, was a statement that the grand jury has charges pending against Patricia Welch, the wife of Richard, for lying about the Leone sisters case. No other charges have been filed. The recent investigation is bringing hope that finally the Leone sisters may be found and their case can be put to rest, but there is still a long way to go, not only to find evidence that shows beyond a reasonable doubt that someone in the Welch family is responsible, but to be able to bury the girls. With more searches on Taylor's Mountain, many are still hopeful their bodies will be discovered. Chapter 4. The McStay Family. Sometimes the missing are found, but what happened to them may be even worse than the assumptions made by those who knew them. The McStay family disappeared on February 4, 2010. The family consisted of Joseph and Summer McStay and their two children, Johnny, 4YRS old, and Joseph Jr., 3YRS old. The day the McStays disappeared, a security camera caught their vehicle leaving their Fallbrook, California home. The vehicle was found abandoned on February 8, 2010, just a few blocks from the Mexican border at a strip mall. Authorities were eventually granted access to border surveillance footage. At the time, it was thought that the family walked across the border and decided to disappear. However, the video footage of a family of four going across the border was not clear enough to ensure it was really the McStay family. For 3 years, authorities would lean towards the theory that the family staged their own disappearance, despite Joseph's father's denial that it could not possibly be the answer. Why would the family leave such an easy trail to follow if they were trying to disappear? More importantly, why would they leave $100,000 in a bank account and not touch it if they were truly willing to go missing? Also, why did the security footage at their home show they left on the 4th? But images of a similar family only appear on the 8th? Question mark. If they did cross the border into Mexico, why did it take them 4 days? The theory had a lot of questions, and rightly so, since the family did not go to Mexico or leave California at all. The missing reappear. On February 10, 2015, CNN ran the story of the McStay family to finally give the nation some answers. In 2010, the McStays were living a great dream. They had a new home, and Joseph's business was doing well. His company Earth Inspired Products was selling waterfalls not only in town, but online. The day police searched the McStay home, they found eggs on the kitchen counter and bowls of popcorn left out in the living room. The 2 dogs the family owned were in the living room unharmed. The house did not show any signs of struggle. In November 2013, an investigation of 4 bodies found in the Mojave Desert finally gave police the answers they were searching for. After the morgue investigation, it was determined the 4 bodies were of the McStay family, and the coroner suspected blunt force trauma. But who would have killed the family and buried them out in the desert? Was the culprit someone the police spoke with throughout the investigation? CNN reports charges have been brought against a family friend, Chase Merritt. Merritt was a business partner and friend. He was working with Joseph anytime a customer needed a custom indoor waterfall. According to Merritt, he ate dinner with the McStay family and had them over to dinner with his family at least once or twice a week. But police feel they have the culprit. By Merritt's own admission, he was the last to see the family alive. There have also been numerous inconsistencies with Merritt's statements about what happened in those final days the McStay family was alive. Joseph's father told police that Joseph wasn't happy with some of Merritt's recent work and clients had complained. According to Patrick McStay, Joseph was looking for someone else who might be able to help him with custom indoor waterfalls. Now the police have to find evidence that will be enough to convict Merritt. Police believe despite the home looking pristine, the family was killed there. Since the home was not searched for 11 days after the family disappeared, there would have been enough time to clean up from the murders and stage a willing disappearance. If that is what happened, then there is going to be a lot of trouble in trying to prove the crime. Police believe one man killed 4 people, and then drove them 100 miles away to the desert. Since the home was unsealed for so long before the warrants were issued, evidence could be contaminated. Even though after 3 years the family was found dead and is no longer classified as missing, the case gives you pause. The next time you choose a business partner, are you going to invite him into your home? Perhaps if someone calls you their best friend, but suddenly starts to provide shoddy work in your partnership, you will start to ask questions. For the McStay family, there is a resolution and possible closed case in the future, but it doesn't mean the next family will have the same resolution. Chapter 5. The Jamison Family. The Jamison family consisted of Bobby, his wife Sherilyn, and his daughter Madison. Madison was just 6 years old. All three disappeared while driving on a dirt road in rural Oklahoma. The date was October 8, 2009. The family told someone that they were going out to look at a plot of land. All that remained was their locked pickup truck, which had their belongings inside along with their dog. The dog was nearly dead of starvation before it was found. The month was cold, which is why the coats they left behind seem a little strange. But more mysterious was the envelope filled with $32,000, which was found under the pickup truck's seat. Reports indicate Bobby and Sherilyn were claiming ghosts were in their home. They were experiencing financial problems, but also displaying some weird behavior before they went missing. Police did not find any signs of foul play, which caused investigators to wonder if the family disappeared willingly or if they committed murder-suicide. Until July 4, 2014, there was no evidence to suggest what happened. The background of the case. Witness statements stated the Jamisons had been in the area of Kinta on October 8, 2009. It was discovered they were looking at a 40-acre area of land close to Sans Bois Mountains when they disappeared. 9 days after witness statements placed them in the area, their vehicle was found. The pickup was just a few miles from where 3 bodies were found in 2013. Latimer County was alerted to 3 bodies in the area when hunters reported the find in 2013. The medical examiner's office finally released details in 2014 stating the bodies are that of Sherilyn, Bobby, and their 6-year-old daughter. However, the cause of death was not determined, according to the Tulsa World posting in July 4, 2014. While the bodies are identified, the cause of death is more difficult because the skeletons are not complete. Authorities still have no evidence to suggest what occurred. While murder-suicide was suggested, there is also the thought that the family had intended on returning to the truck since they left the dog inside along with money and their belongings. According to Sherilyn Jamison's mother, Sherilyn was on a religious cult hit list. The Oklahoman also reported the family had a protective order petition in place for 6 months before they disappeared. The petition was against Bobby Jamison's father. The petition stated the father threatened to kill the family 2 times within a 6-month period. Nothing ever came of the case since Bobby Jamison's father died in December 2009. It took 4 years for the bodies to be found, but investigators are no closer to piecing together the crime. Chapter 6. Gloria Bible and Ashley Freeman. Gloria Bible decided to spend the night with her friend, Ashley Freeman. The night was December 31, 1999. The place was a rural town in Oklahoma. This is a case that has held the eyes of many and even created TV shows around it. For reasons unknown, the Freeman trailer, which is where the girls were sleeping, burned down. Police found Ashley's mother, Kathy Freeman, shot to death outside. The 2 girls along with Danny Freeman were missing. Kathy Freeman was lying on the waterbed inside with a gunshot wound to her head. Police continued to search for any sign of the 2 girls and Ashley's father Danny. Investigating in broad daylight, authorities were able to find Danny, who was also shot. During the original search it was too dark to see clearly, which is why his body was missed the first time firemen and police were at the scene. Danny was shot in the bottom portion of his face next to the waterbed. Only one thing was missing from the rubble besides the two girls, an arrowhead collection. It is unclear if Danny may have sold it, or if it was stolen because of its value. Gloria's car was still parked out front of the house with the keys in the ignition. Her purse was found among the charred rubble of the house. OSBI investigators found a small cache of weapons too. At first the police considered the girls to be the prime suspects. It was thought that for reasons unknown they might have shot the Freemans and then burned the trailer down. With more investigation, police did learn about rumors of Danny Freeman being involved with drugs and having a large debt owed to local drug sellers. A little later, two serial killers claimed they had abducted and then murdered Ashley and her friend. Tommy Lee Sells and Jeremy Jones were already convicted when they decided to confess to the 1999 abduction and murder. Jones stated the bodies were dumped in a mineshaft, but after following the lead, police could find nothing. 16 years later, Jay and Laureen Bible are still looking to find answers. They have asked the FBI, Sheriff's Office, and District Attorney's Office to release all pertinent details and leads, so they can help solve their daughter's disappearance. Gloria's parents do not feel she is dead, but the surviving members of Ashley Freeman had her declared dead in 2010. A new lead in 2014. Newstalk.com released a media statement in December 2014 to say new leads had surfaced in the last few months. The investigators did find out that two people got into an argument with Danny Freeman just 2 weeks before he and his wife were shot to death and the two friends went missing. The police do not consider these men as suspects, but wish to speak with them in hopes that they can shed some light on what might have happened in the weeks prior to the deaths in two missing girls' case. The lead prosecutor did say Freeman ran the men off and told them if they came back, he would run them off with a gun next time. Burned alive or kidnapped. A wood fire usually burns between 800 and 900 degrees Celsius. The cremation process uses an industrial furnace that generates temperatures of 870 to 980 degrees Celsius. It is possible for a body to burn in a fire as long as it burns long enough. Cremation requires 1 hour per 100 pounds of body weight. The difference when a body burns in a house fire is that remnants usually remain to at least show a body was there. It is unknown how long the fire burned in the Freeman home, but the suggested evidence and TV shows about the unsolved mystery show it was not long enough to obscure two teenage girls' bodies. Did the girls commit a heinous act in order to run away, or was there a deeper, darker secret due to Danny Freeman's life choices that resulted in the girls being kidnapped? Teenage girls, even in this day and age, can be kidnapped, sold, and work as slaves to the highest bidder. Is Lori Bible's mom correct and she is still alive and unable to escape? Chapter 7. The crew of the Sarah Joe. The crew of the Sarah Joe might seem like an obvious case of drowning, but what if some of the boat pieces were found much later and over 2,000 miles away from where it might have gone down? On February 19, 1979, 5 men left Maui in a boat called the Sarah Joe. The men were Benjamin Kalama, Scott Mormon, Ralph Malayakini, Peter Hanchett, and Patrick Wozner. They were just going out for a little fishing trip, but a storm came up before they came back to port. Several people of Hana, Hawaii risked their lives on February 19, trying to find the lost 17-foot Boston whaler. Ralph Malaakini borrowed the boat from his brother. Ralph and Robert were twins, aged 27 at the time. According to statements and those who knew the five men, they played ball, fished, and drank beer together often. They even had a nickname, the Nahiku Gorillas. When the Sarah Joe first left the island, the ocean was flat and calm, with a nice clear day for fishing. John Hanchett in 2009 recalled the day his son Peter, 31, went missing. He also remembered Scott Mormon age 27, Benjamin Kalama age 38, and Patrick Wosner age 26. Hanchett said it was just like any other day, except for a call over the Citizens Band radio that reported engine trouble. John Hanchett said the crew of the Sarah Joe did not have a radio. The families of the five missing men started to worry around 1 p.m. when the boat was not back because the wind was rising. When darkness fell, the storm was raging violently, but Bobby Poovey still went out to search for the men in his 26-foot boat. The Coast Guard searched for 5 days, looking for any sign of a wreck or the men in the water. They followed the currents, which might have taken the men through Alanuihaha Channel. The currents were known to be extremely swift, even on a good day. The Naval Oceans Systems Center in Dan Diego donated 3 homing pigeons to the search. They had been trained to spot red or orange international colors. Unfortunately, before the birds could arrive by helicopter, their ride had to make a forced landing off Kona. All crew were fine, but the trained rescue pigeons were lost. Among the searchers in 1979 was John Naughton, who worked for the National Marine Fisheries Service. Most would think the 5 men drowned and were lost at sea. However, 2,000 miles away, in 1988, pieces of the Sarah Joe were found on an island. Naughton was out inspecting Taongi, which is a northern coral atoll in the Marshall Islands. While out there, he spotted a wrecked boat. He could make out the Hawaiian registry number prominently on the hull. Going on shore, Naughton was able to see that it was the Sarah Joe. He also noted what looked to be a thick pad of notepaper mixed up with aluminum foil, but it did not have writing on it. The next thing to happen was the uncovering of a shallow grave on that same island. After an investigation, it was found that the remains in the grave were of Scott Mormon. Whoever buried him left the body in the sand under a pile of rocks. The biggest question on everyone's mind is what happened to the other 4 men. Did they bury Scott Mormon, but if so, what happened to them? If they did not bury him, then who did? Added to the story is that years prior to the grave and the remains of the Sarah Joe, the island had been searched. After assessing the storm and currents, the island was searched, so why did nothing come up before 1988 to indicate where any of the men on the Sarah Joe were, let alone the newer grave marking Scott Mormon's resting place? In 1989, family members spoke with Unsolved Mysteries in hopes the show would be able to bring in some new information as to what happened to the rest of the men aboard the Sarah Joe, or at least find out who buried Scott Mormon. No leads came from publicizing the incident. All that is known as Scott Mormon's body did not provide enough answers. Julie Mormon, Scott's sister, and her family felt Scott must have been alive when he reached the island. However, forensics could not answer if he was or was not alive. Chapter 8. The Fandle Children. Margaret Fandle was living in Sterling, Alaska with her two children, Scott and Amy. Scott was 13 years old and Amy was 8. On September 4, 1978, Margaret, her two children, and a visiting Aunt Kathy went out to dinner. The group of four left the restaurant at 10 p.m. Both Margaret and Kathy dropped the children off at Margaret's cabin, which was located in the woods of the rural Alaskan town. The cabin was near Scout Lake Road, just a half-mile from Sterling Highway and to the south of Sterling. There was only one bright streetlight out front of the cabin. The cabin door lock also did not work. The two ladies did not stay. Instead, they went back to Good Time Charlie's bar and restaurant to converse a little more. Margaret admitted to not returning until sometime between 2 and 3 a.m. When they arrived home, Margaret found the lights were out inside the cabin. Concerned because her children were afraid of the dark and usually left the lights on, she went inside. She found a package of macaroni on the counter along with an open can of tomatoes. There was also water boiling in a pot on the stove. It seemed like Scott had been interrupted while making a snack, something he liked to do before going to bed. For whatever reason, despite the condition of the kitchen, Margaret and Kathy thought the children must have gone to the Lupton home. They decided to retire for the night, while the mother was away. The investigation showed that Scott and Amy visited the Lupton family after they were dropped off by their mother and aunt. They often went over to play with the Lupton children and usually walked to school with them. The Luptons told investigators the children went home after playing for a while. At 11:45 p.m., another neighbor noted lights were on at the Fandle cabin. It seemed conceivable that the children would have gone back over to the Luptons to sleep when their mother did not return home, but what would account for the uncooked food? September 5, 1978. Margaret left for work at 8:30 a.m. without checking on her children at the Lupton house. Kathy did not wake until 12 p.m. Given the time and the date, she assumed the children had already left for school. Margaret did try to call Amy at school, but learned her children did not arrive. Concerned, Margaret asked permission to leave work, but her boss would not grant it. In the afternoon, Kathy learned the children had not been in class at all, and they had not stayed over at the Lupton house like Margaret assumed. Immediately concerned, she called Margaret, who then called the police. When police arrived, all they found were some bullet casings outside the cabin, but they could not determine if these were linked to the two children. A few years later the cabin burned down, but that did not produce any leads either, such as finding the remains hidden beneath the cabin. Margaret moved to Illinois soon after her children went missing. Scott's father lived in Illinois as well as an uncle, Terry Schoenfelder. Suspecting Roger. It was thought that Roger Fandle, Amy's father, took the children. He had left 9 months before the children disappeared to move to Arizona. At first Margaret could not reach Roger, but his family stated he did not know where the children were. As soon as he found out his child was missing, he flew up to Alaska to help with the search. A girlfriend allegedly told police if she received a reward of $5,000 she would tell them what Roger had done. Authorities were able to eliminate, or at least lower the suspicion, they had on Roger for the missing children. Terry Schoenfelder has his own theory about the missing Amy and Scott. He believes Amy is actually alive and living in Anchorage, Alaska, Lompoc, CA, or Drummond, Montana. He also believes that Scott was killed shortly after being abducted by some unknown person. There is no proof that his theory is correct, but perhaps it is based on leads they have obtained over the years. They also could not form a concrete theory as to what might have happened that night. No evidence was found to suggest they went walking to the neighbors only to encounter a bear, or were kidnapped by someone they knew or didn't know. Even close to 40 years later, police have no idea what occurred. Chapter 9. The Sauter Children. A plaque is posted in Fayetteville, West Virginia that reads, "After 30 years it is not too late to investigate. On Christmas Eve 1945, our home was set afire. And 5 of our children kidnapped. The officials blamed defective wiring, although lights were still burning after the fire started. The official report stated that the children died in the fire. However, no bones were found in the residue and there was no smell of burning flesh during or after the fire. What was the motive of the law officers involved? What did they have to gain by making us suffer all these years of injustice? Why did they lie and force us to accept those lies?" George and Jenny Sauter did not believe their children died in the house fire on December 24, 1945. Their family of 10 children became a family of 5 children that night. Betty, Jenny, Louis, Maurice, and Martha were never found. The police insisted that the children died in the fire, but they could never find any bodies. Unfortunately, the investigation did not provide enough answers that anyone today can track down. What is known is that a fire started, a few remains were found, but of course no DNA was run given the era. Some have suggested that the remains, given their condition and when they were found, were stolen from a cemetery and simply planted in the house to make sure the family would stop looking for their 5 children. Many have theorized that someone set the house on fire as a means of abducting the 5 children. The investigation did reveal the phone line was cut and there was a ladder found 75 feet away from the house. It would suggest that someone propped the ladder against the house, took the children, and then set the fire. Eyewitnesses claimed to see the children in various places, but those sightings were never confirmed. In 1968, the family received a photograph of a man who could have been Louis Sauter, all grown up. George and Jenny died without ever finding a truth they could believe with regards to their children. Is this a case of parents unable to accept the truth, or did 5 children truly disappear that night, never to be heard from again? Is it really a reality to consider these children were all abducted by a person on a ladder, or is it more likely that the 5 children used the ladder to run away and perhaps set the fire? Without conclusive DNA proof, which no one is probably willing to run the test 50 years later, there may never be an answer. Chapter 10. The Springfield Three. Stacy McCall, Suzanne Streeter and Cheryl Levitt vanished without a trace in 1992. More mysterious is that all three were last seen at Levitt's home in the 1700 block of East Delmar Street, Springfield, Missouri. Those who remain behind are hunting for answers, yet in 2015 there is still nothing. Cheryl Levitt was 46 when she disappeared. Susie, Cheryl's daughter, was 19. Stacy McCall, Susie's friend, was 18. Streeter and McCall had graduated from Kickapoo High School with a ceremony held on June 6, 1992. The young women headed to a party at another friend's house, but finding the place too crowded, the two friends decided to go back to the Levitt house. The time was approximately 2 a.m. On June 7. Th. Although the friends each had their own vehicle, the two still decided to leave the party separately and arrive at the Levitt home to continue staying together. The original plan was to stay at a hotel, then they changed to staying with the friend having the party. So it was only when they left the party that their friends and Susie's mother would learn that they were heading in separate cars to the Levitt house. Police felt the two girls probably arrived at 2:15 a.m. at the house. It was known they were going to Whitewater Amusement Park the next afternoon, but they would never get to those Sunday plans. Something unknown occurred at the Levitt home, leaving two newly graduated teenage girls and one mother missing for more than 20 years. Cheryl was talking with a friend at 11:15 p.m. on the phone. The June 6. Th. phone call was the last contact anyone who knew Cheryl had with her, except possibly the teenage girls. On the phone, Cheryl indicated she had plans to paint a dresser. She was also very connected with the town as a hairdresser in a local salon. Many considered the relationship she had with her daughter as a close one. Friends were supposed to meet Susie and Stacy at the Levitt home in the afternoon. They arrived, but no one answered the door. They could see that both girls' cars were still in the driveway. The only other thing of note was a smashed porch light. The glass globe had shattered onto the front porch. The friends decided to clean up the glass, and since the door was open, they entered the home. They couldn't know that they were entering what would later be considered a crime scene. With the cars out front in the driveway, the friends assumed the girls had gone for a walk. However, the three women did not return home after a short while. Concerned, the friend called over to Stacy's home to speak with Janice McCall. She did not know that Stacy had been at Susie's since they were supposed to be at a home in Battlefield for the night. Stacy had spoken with her mother at 10:30 p.m. on June 6 to say they would be in Battlefield. Extremely concerned, Stacy's mother went to Cheryl's home and then called the police to report all three as missing. Investigators arrived at the home, but saw no signs of foul play, or even a struggle in the home. What they found caused more questions than answers because all the keys, makeup, clothing, and purses of the three women were inside the home. The family dog, a Yorkie called Cinnamon, was very anxious and running around. Police did note the blinds in the home were slightly apart as if someone had peered out of them, but other than that, the home seemed like the women had left for a short time. They took note of Cheryl's bedroom, which looked like she had been in bed watching television. A book and her glasses were on the nightstand. She had also left her cigarettes and lighter in the home. Police searched around the house looking to see if someone had dumped 3 bodies outside to make it a little harder, but they recovered nothing. For years police would follow any lead, interview as many friends, family, and anyone who knew the 3 women, including boyfriends. The news would dub them the Springfield Three. One witness called in to say a Dodge van with green paint had been in the area, but they did not know the owner or the license plate. Other callers said it was possible they might be buried in a local hospital parking lot just prior to the concrete pour. In 1993, the Springfield Three story was aired on Unsolved Mysteries, America's Most Wanted, and 48 Hours. America's Most Wanted had a caller, but when the operator tried to patch the call into the Springfield Police Department, the person disconnected. Theories that the caller knew what happened were bandied about, but it could not be proven. Police started looking at Bart Streeter, Susie's older brother. He continues to be on the suspect list, but has never been charged. A new lead with a new suspect. Springfield police had questioned Robert Craig Cox early in the investigation. It was known that he had served time in Florida for murdering a 19-year-old girl named Sharon Zellers. While he was on death row, the case was overturned due to insufficient evidence. Cox was let go, but later arrested in California for kidnapping, which happened in 1985. In 1992, he was back home in Springfield, Missouri. Janice McCall told reporters that she had seen Cox working on an underground cable close to Cheryl's home. With no evidence, the police could only question him. Cox did not stay in Missouri long after the 3 women went missing. He moved on to Plano, Texas, where he was again investigated for a kidnapping. This time he was sentenced to a Texas prison. The charges were for aggravated robbery. During that case in 1994, he told the grand jury he was with his girlfriend when the Springfield Three went missing. In 1994, the girlfriend said Cox was not with her. Yet, in 1995, she recanted and said Cox had been with her. According to Robert Keyes, a reporter, Cox had told him that he knew the women were dead, even murdered, and they would never be found. Cox is still in prison and cannot be released until 2025. In 2002, the new lead was received through a tip. The green van, which had been seen by a witness, supposedly belonged to 2 men working at the concrete company. The caller said the 2 men buried the 3 women on farmland in Webster County. A 2-week search, with proper warrant, found some items, but the results were not shared with the media. 13 years later, it seems the police are not pursuing the lead in Webster County anymore, but whatever they found could tie into the Springfield Three or another case. The hospital garage theory. Kathy Baird, a crime reporter in Springfield, started to dig into the case. Her independent search led her to the Cox South Hospital parking lot, which had been under construction when the women disappeared. Speaking with Police Chief Mark Webb, he confirmed the fact that early tips suggested that the women might be buried in that area. The police dismissed the tips because nothing seemed credible. In 2006, Baird decided it was credible enough to request Rick Norland do a search with ground-penetrating radar. Norland often assists New York City authorities, particularly after 2011. During his 2006 search, he did find 3 anomalies that are consistent with graves. The radar showed depressions 3 feet below the concrete surface. At the time, Norland recommended that drilling a hole in the area and taking a core sample should occur. With a sample, plus a submerged camera, it would be possible to tell if the anomalies were bodies. Despite sharing the information with police, Baird and Norland did not get the response they hoped for. Police did not think it was enough evidence to dig up the parking lot. Baird offered to pay for the expenses, but the police still did not wish to dig up the lot. Even other experts in the field said it was worth the chance. As of 2015, the parking lot has still not been cored. The hospital made a statement that they would defer to the police, but the police would not budge on their final denial to core the concrete. Do the police actually know the bodies are buried there and do not want problems with the investigation to surface? Was someone in law enforcement responsible? Given their refusal to core the parking lot, it gives rise to conspiracy thoughts such as these. For Janice McCall, all she wants is to know what happened to her daughter. Chapter 11. The Roanoke Colony. The first massive disappearance of more than one person that America can track is that of North Carolina's Roanoke Colony. For centuries the island has been a place of mystery. Settlers arrived on the island in 1587 only to completely disappear in 1590. Journals indicate only 2 clues were left behind to tell new settlers what happened. The first clue was the word Croatoan, which was carved into a gatepost at the fort. A tree also had crow etched into it. Anthropologists and archaeologists have tried for decades to figure out what happened. They have plenty of theories, such as a Native American tribe killing every settler to a horrible disease killing every last person. Yet, how is it possible for an entire colony to die of a disease and not have one body left? It's possible that the rest of the settlers were burned after they died, but wouldn't the last person simply fall over dead? The only other option is that some survived and moved on from the original settlement. These are the questions many have asked as they try to dig up the island for clues, artifacts, and whatever the earth wishes to reveal. The Roanoke colony that disappeared was not the first to settle on the island. The first group arrived in 1584. The second in 1585, and they were responsible for military and scientific exploration. The second group met with resistance from Native American tribes and left in 1586, returning to their British homes and a more civilized world. Despite the early difficulties with the first 2 groups, the third came with 17 women, 11 children, and 90 men. The group was not military in design, but it did have male explorers. A new group of people arrived from Britain in 1590 expecting to find Roanoke Island and the fort buzzing with people. Instead, they found an abandoned fort with only 2 carvings as clues to show what might have happened. With 3 years from the time the group arrived till the new exploration, it would have been easy for a Native American tribe to hide the evidence of the entire colony. Recent find. A recent find by archaeologists is an old map, which shows La Virginia Pars. The map was made by John White, the colony's governor. The map shows 2 patches, which piqued the interest of Brent Lane of the First Colony Foundation. Recently, the British Museum conducted an examination of the patches on the map to find a tiny red and blue symbol. Theorists wonder if it was some secret emergency location or another fort the third colonists built. However, the new discovery does not give any answers to what truly happened, yet. The reigning theory. Most researchers believe illness was an issue. The New World contained different diseases and food that no one had been exposed to, making them more susceptible to illness. These researchers felt the group decided to break up into smaller groups, perhaps with the healthy individuals moving on to Hatteras Island, 50 miles to the south. At the time the island was called Croatoan. Others have a theory that the group headed up west via Albemarle Sound to Chowan River and met with a tribe that allowed them to live together. It would be the perfect strategic location for trading and living. One researcher, Klingelhofer, believes the map is showing the area near Albemarle Sound and that with ground-penetrating radar the lost colony of Roanoke will be found. The new theory is going to be examined in coming years. Archaeologists will go in and dig where they believe the colony may have relocated. But will this finally end the age-old mystery or raise more questions? Will researchers make a new discovery of a Native American tribe location or truly find what finally happened to over 90 people? Conclusion. Do you lock your doors at night? Do you have a security system installed? If it is possible for 3 women to go missing from their home, as well as one entire family to be murdered, presumed missing, and later found, wouldn't it be best to have some sort of protection in place? Many of us live feeling secure that our home, apartment, condo, or townhome is all the safety we need. However, for those who have gone missing in multiples, the proof is here. You are never as safe as you think you are. One person with malicious thoughts can turn your life and those who live with you upside down. One minute you might be happy eating a meal and enjoying life, and the next you could be among the top 10 multiple missing persons list. If an entire colony can go missing for over 4 centuries, then it is possible for a few people to go missing even longer. Already the Springfield Three have been missing decades. According to one family, their children are still missing despite clear evidence that the children were burned alive in a fire. The next time you go to a mall, to visit a potential property to purchase, or simply have a night in, ask yourself, are you really safe?